to myself, this guy must be either a genius, either completely crazy. Well, obviously he's a genius, and we are celebrating him now for that reason.
The fact that he's still doing it, you know, more than 30 years later, is just amazing.
He's a great talent, lovely man, and annoyingly a year younger than me. Bastard.
I think Ian defined a style of rock singing which has stayed with us.
Don't come into my part of the stage. If you do, I'm going to smack you with my guitar. My mic stand was much longer than his guitar, so we actually had a pitched battle on stage with mic stands and guitars. It became from being a thing of joy to an absolute nightmare. Banjo players are terrific.
Bang, it went, and his tenor went whoosh. And not only that, all the concussion went through the lake, and all Richard Branson's prize fish come floating to the top.
He can scream like no other. Like no other.
You can't really copy what he does. It's very unique, and that's a gift. Kerosene.
London 2006. Thousands of fans crammed the tiny Astoria Theatre for an exclusive date with one of the greatest rock bands ever, Deep Purple.
I never imagined that I'd be turning 60 and about to pack my bags and embark on a 2-year tour. It is very exciting.
It's the warm-up show for their latest Mammoth World Tour, showcasing both established classics and a whole raft of powerful new songs.
Highway Star was a new song once. The new songs become the new dynamism in the show. Great creative force within the band, which manifests itself in songwriting and, as always, stage performance.
Ian Gillan's story charts a dramatic journey on the rock and roll highway, through heartbreak, fights, betrayal, and bankruptcy.
There's never much to talk about. Things moved on. We had good times and some really bad times too.
Ian Ian Gillan was born in Hounslow, London, with a song in his heart and a scream on his lips.
Oh, he was just very, very noisy, but very quiet when he had to be quiet. When he went to church, and he was in the church choir, and then one day he came home, he said, I'm not going anymore. He said, I can't get my alleluias right in one of the hymns. But he didn't really show a lot of interest until Elvis Presley came on the scene, and that was it.
I had this dream walking home one day that really changed my life. I went to see an Elvis Presley movie, one of his early ones, and I thought, I know how I can be a film star. Because I didn't really want to go to all the hassle of going to acting school, and I didn't really want to mess around with playing minor roles. I just wanted to be a film star. So I thought that, well, the easiest way to do this is to actually become a singer first.
I came home one weekend and we were sitting on the stairs with my biscuit tin with the knitting needles, doing this, you know, and then doing this. And it went on and on and on. And he said, I'm going to be a singer. I was going to be a singer. Oh.
Encouraged by his mother to chase his dreams, Ian decided to form his own rock and roll band with some of his school friends.
Well, I'm starting a group, as it was called in those days. Rehearsals, my house, 10 o'clock Saturday morning. Okay, he went, sure, yeah. And they all turned up with acoustic guitars in various stages of disrepair. So there's lots of strumming and yelling and jumping around on settees and wishing we had amplifiers so we could be even louder. And then my mother came in and said, that's quite enough of that.
The dream quickly became a realistic ambition. With schoolboy bands the Moonshiners, the Javelins and Wainwright's Gentlemen, Ian, otherwise known as Jess Thunder or Garth Rocket, discovered a unique power behind his voice. He was soon spotted by promising pop hopefuls, Episode 6. Roger Glover was their bass player and backing singer.
He walked with a swagger. He walked like a movie star. I always remember thinking he always had imaginary guns on because he always walked like... Every time he walked into a bar, he looked like he was ready for trouble. It was perfect, really. I mean, born to be a pop star.
He certainly wasn't born to work at an ice-making machine factory where he took orders over the phone by day, but by night he took to the stage with Episode 6.
They had lovely voices, all of them could sing, and it used to be a lovely blend of voices. Ian had often come in from work. He hadn't even finished his pudding and he'd grab his pie and custard, whatever it was, and run out to the van with it. And Roger would come in and I'd say, Roger, would you like a mug of soup? He said, oh, yes, please. So he'd go out with a mug of soup and Ian would go out with his pie and custard and finish it off in the van.
He quit his job in the factory and turned professional. The year was 1966. Ian was 20 years old.
And we went on to make 10 singles or something like that and had a great time.
Ian's TV debut came with the release of a single called I Hear Trumpets Blow. Ian soon became close friends with art student Roger Glover. That's him in the sunglasses.
I was a songwriter. I was always a songwriter, long before I knew Ian. And I said, you know, we should write songs together.
And I went, ha. No, hadn't even occurred to me. So he said, right, I'm never going to speak to you again until you've written a song. And
But we ended up writing some songs together, and they weren't very good, most of them.
In any event, I regained his respect and we became, I'd say a songwriting team, although we were for many years, but we developed as individuals as well. But we were definitely a unit.
Episode 6 quickly developed a large following and were expected to make it big.
We'd have people like David Bowie supporting us and things like that. I mean, big crowds, racetracks. I mean, you're talking big crowds. I mean, 25, 30,000 people.
It was during this period that Ian began to develop his trademark silver-throated screams.
Sheila, our keyboardist, used to come out in each show and do 3 or 4 songs or something like that, at which point I went back to the keyboards and took over not only the keyboard parts but also the harmony parts, which were, needless to say, the highest parts. Part of it was higher than my normal register, so I started singing a kind of singing falsetto, and some of them I suddenly found myself getting higher and higher and higher, and until I could do the octave to her part above, and it gave a unique sound to our vocal reach, and I found it was very natural.
Where are you going, Mr. Universe? Are we searching?
We went to Beirut for Christmas of '66 and '67. We had huge success. We had something like 6 singles in the Lebanese top 10, which was wonderful. But when we came back, we had nothing. We'd missed the boat, and I think we lost direction to a certain extent.
1968!
As episode 6 floundered, another band called Deep Purple were looking to change direction. They'd already had a smash hit in America with Hush.
I was a huge fan of Deep Purple. I had the 3 albums, Deep Purple, Book of Taliesin and Shades.
Episode 6's drummer, Mick Underwood, knew Deep Purple's guitarist Ritchie Blackmore, and when Blackmore asked if he knew any singers, he recommended Gillan. John Lord was Purple's keyboard player.
Went along to see episode 6 play, and there began the story.
You get these suspicious-looking people who obviously aren't part of the audience, sort of lurking in a corner, sort of checking you out, you know.
And then that voice, you know, that range, those top notes was shattering. And I looked at Blackmore and Pacey and went, whoa, I mean, is that different enough, do you think? And everybody just went and nodded. I mean, and the strange thing is that considering the later antagonism between Ritchie and Ian Gillan, Ritchie kind of nodded and went, great, and walked out.
Gillan was invited to record a song called Hallelujah, an uplifting pop rock number that gave a few hints of what was to follow.
It was only when we got into the first rehearsal situation where I could actually hear what Ian was capable of doing, because the episode 6 records gave you no idea of what was in that voice box, you know, that it all started to make sense, and I had an idea definitely what Ritchie wanted to hear.
It was very quickly obvious that his range was astonishing and that he wasn't afraid to head for the heights, you know.
Ian's ability to take rock and roll somewhere which we hadn't been able to do with Rod started opening up the vistas, you know, astronomically. We hadn't got this narrow confine anymore of what the vocalist range was, because Ian could sort of go anywhere. And that became very exciting.
Ian Gillan also found it exciting that he could now get his hallelujahs right after his failures as a choir boy. Roger Glover was also invited to join the rehearsals.
Well, I looked at Roger and said, this is it. They're just great players. Wonderful. Everything sounded great. The balance was great. And we seemed to fit. It's like trying on a jacket. You know, well, I'm going to have this. It just fits.
The possibilities were enormous. And that very first day, I mean, I think we wrote Speed King. And the next day we wrote Child in Time. You know, it was just It was a magic flowering time for both of us.
She didn't do it that as well. Come on, baby, drive me crazy. I'm a speed king. You gotta hear me sing. Speed king, see me fly. Saturday night and I just got paid. All about money, no, I'm trying to say. People out of rock, people out of roll. Have a party to save my smile. Out here on the side, crowded man. Cause trouble since it all began. Took a little rice, take a little beans. Rock and roll down in New Orleans. I'm a speed king. Hear me sing. Speed king. See me fly.
It was blues-based, rock-based, and a little funky, and a little classical, and a little folk. And so all these rich influences were coming into the band because of the diversity of the backgrounds of all the individuals.
The result was a volatile mixture of fearless innovation and musical finesse that was destined to spearhead a new genre of rock.
The first gig was at the Speakeasy, I believe, in London. And I was pretty choked up. I mean, there were about 20 people there, and they were all roadies. Apart from Keith Moon, I think, it was under the table. It was very emotional, yeah, because he suddenly realised what was happening here. It was, you didn't have to say it, you just felt it, really. The timing was perfect. The public was ready to move on from this wonderful flavour of what had gone before with English music, with the Kinks and the Small Faces and the Beatles. They wanted to hear the freedom in the studio. They wanted to accept new ideas. It was very street, very, as we call it, underground.
But while Purple's reputation grew, for Ian and Roger it wasn't yet paying the bills. By now, even the one decent set of clothes they shared were looking shabby. Ian decided to ask the management for help.
I said, I was wondering if Rog and I could have an advance of £100 so that we can go to Carnaby Street and get some kit, so that we can both go out at the same time together. And you can dock it from our weekly drawings. And he looked at me, he said, Gillan, he said, I knew you were trouble the moment I set eyes on you. He said, if you come back to me with one more request for money, I'm going to throw you back in the gutter where I found you. Which was my introduction to the big time.
Ian had only been in Deep Purple for a matter of weeks, and already their landmark album, In Rock, was nearing completion. But even that early on, trouble was brewing within the band.
The management was very keen to do this project with the Royal Philharmonic at the Royal Albert Hall with Malcolm Arnold. And Roger and I, being the new boys, were thinking, what's going on here? Because are we in a rock band or are we in a classical rock gimmick band? I have to say, I showed a certain amount of disrespect for the project, a certain amount of reluctance to do it. I didn't write the lyrics until I think it was an hour or so before the performance in an Italian restaurant. And we didn't understand it at all at the time. But years later, you suddenly realise, John Lord wrote this thing. It is incredible.
The concerto also saw the debut of a song destined to become a classic.
Sweet child in time.
He said was singing, I'll be singing a new song tonight at the Albert Hall, and it was called Child in Time, but I had no idea that he was going up 2 octaves. You know, I couldn't believe it.
You better close your eyes.
Lyrically, of course, it was very much about the incredible tension of the Cold War, but it was a standoff of immense proportions, probably the biggest one that we've seen historically, with the most dangerous implications. We were all scared to death. I could sing an octave above the normal falsetto. Some people call it screaming, but in actual fact it was completely under control, with vibrato and everything.
Those astonishing ululations that chilled a generation, I think will chill further generations. They will. It's an astounding piece of vocal wizardry.
Late '69 also saw the emergence of another musical force that was to dominate a whole genre and sell millions of records.
Wanted bloke to sing Jesus.
Jesus Christ Superstar was really such an incredible experience.
We put on this tape, and it was Child in Time from Deep Purple in rock, which at that point hadn't come out. But it sounded really fantastic, and we said, well, this guy Ian sounds right up our alley.
Ian was invited to meet Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber to try out the role of Jesus.
Andrew Lloyd Webber was sitting at the piano, and he sort of went like that as I came in the room, and I thought it was a comedy act, basically, because it sounded as if he was playing the piano whilst wearing boxing gloves, and I'd never heard anything quite like that.
We were a bit nervous. We thought, here's this heavy rocker, and we're probably, you know, two middle-class twits, you know, and he probably thinks, what am I doing here? But no, he seemed to be really enthusiastic.
Tim said, well, there's the words, and Andy said, here's the tune, and so there was the tune, and Tim said, feel free to improvise. So I did, and stuck fairly rigidly to the tune, which was excellent, brilliantly written, and you couldn't fail with that kind of music and those kind of words.
Southport should be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves.
It was a joy to sing, a joy to sing. Everything was just there. And I sort of forgot all about it, really. And then it became hugely successful.
The Jesus Christ Superstar album has gone on to sell more than 19 million copies worldwide.
He's always been very nice about it ever since. He hasn't tried to disown it, as some people might have done. I think he was genuinely glad he did it. And he made a few bob out of it, too.
Despite the distractions of operas and orchestras, Deep Purple in rock was finally finished and ready to hit the shelves. But the record company insisted on having a single. The band were only given an extra day in the studio to write and record it.
There was a riff. Lyrics were needed. A pub was involved.
Ian was the last to come back, as I remember, because he hadn't finished tasting all the samples of the spirits along the bar. And he was pretty trashed. I mean, more so than we were by the time he got back. Okay, what should we write? Black Night. Black Night. Ian said, I don't feel too bright, so that'll do. Right. Can't see dark light. Yeah, brilliant. Oh, yeah.
Black night is not right. Don't feel so bright. I don't care to sit tight. Maybe you find on the way down the line that I'm free. Free to be me. Wow, yeah. Black night is a long way from home.
We had these words which actually sound great, and they're great to sing, but they're somewhat enigmatic, I think. I really can't remember.
The management said, great, we got it. We go, no. You can't use that. Yeah, we're going to use it. That's great. And sure enough, it was great. So it's made me think twice now about my songwriting process. Maybe I should get drunk every time.
We were number 2 for 7 weeks, I believe.
For me, it was the most wonderful feeling, picking up a chart in the NME or whatever and seeing Black Knight there, you know, somewhere in and around, I don't know what, tie a yellow ribbon or, you know, some such nonsense. That they'd actually infiltrated pop with their rock, you know, and that influenced us a lot. We always saw ourselves as doing the same role.
Deep Purple had made it. Some of their biggest fans included Schoolboy's Joe Elliott and Bruce Dickinson, a young wannabe Blackmorian guitarist named Tony Blair, and a certain genius soccer player.
Deep Purple were, what, 69 roughly, and of course they were just massive. And in those days, I mean, obviously it was towards the end of the 60s, but the 60s for me, football-wise, was just starting to, you know, go crazy. And the whole world of, and of course the music in those days, in the 60s and then into the 70s, was just, in Britain, was phenomenal. And Deep Purple were just amazing.
Deep Purple in rock hit the album charts and made a rapid rise to the top 5.
The first time I think we entered the NME chart at number 29 or something like that. We're in Scotland. And I remember him sitting there with a tear in his eye thinking, wow, we did it.
It was a meteoric rise. Demand for Deep Purple tickets soon spiralled out of control.
This huge thing in Glasgow, there were photographs of the whole of Socket Hall Street being closed, riots from end to end. Purple mania, they called it.
Trying to get a ticket for Deep Purple was like trying to get a ticket for Man United these days. You just, they're not available. Or if you don't get in quick, you don't get in.
The atmosphere in the band was fantastic. It was just one long laugh, really. I mean, the music was definitely the focus. I mean, I think we all realised that we had something very special.
In those early days, the only sparring that occurred between Gillan and Blackmore was on stage.
That dueling guitar vocal thing sort of just happened one night. Richie played a lick, Ian copied it in exactly the same range, and then Richie did it an octave higher, and Ian did it an octave higher. And you could see the look on Richie's face of, wow, you know, that's good. And so it grew out of improvisation. But it was a duel of wits.
He knew how to enjoy the time off between shows. But we were all doing it to certain degrees. I mean, that's what it was. You were in a very privileged position. You had a few quid in your pocket. You were the centre of attention wherever you went. The attractions were many and plentiful and very easy to get hold of. And it was easy for all of us to fall into party mode at any given time. Ian just took it to a new extreme.
If you take your average guy from a council estate who's never eaten in a restaurant, and never stayed in a hotel, you fill his pockets with more money than he's ever seen. Introduce him to bars after work where you never have to put your hand in your pocket to buy a round. Surround them with fizzy, wonderful, exciting, enthusiastic women. Pretty soon you will find that you lose control. You don't know how to cope with it. And consequently you start to cover your embarrassment. You do outrageous things.
Blackmore and Gillan quickly established themselves as Purple's practical jokers. Glover was usually the butt of their jokes, but sometimes Gillan also fell foul of Blackmore's humour.
He was in the bath in the dressing room, trying to put his stage gear on, and Blackmore just pushed him out onto the stage, and a rather startled Ian arrived in the middle of the stage, you know, and to a packed house, who of course gave him a huge round of applause. And Ian, instead of covering his modesty as most people would do, bowed and thanked his audience and went back in and poured his beer over Richie's head. I mean, you know, so it was it was just boyish fun, and that's all it mostly was. It was later it got darker.
At that time, Deep Purple only lived up to 2/3 of the old cliché. There was plenty of sex and loads of rock and roll. But where were the drugs?
There wasn't a single guy in the band that was into drugs. Nobody. Wouldn't have it around. We'd all come from drinking backgrounds, so it was just didn't even interest us.
I have no real way of knowing what it was that caused Richie to start disliking Ian, because that's the way round it started. When we first were on the road together, Blackmore and Gillan roomed together, and happily, you know, no problems for a good long time. And I can only think that the disharmony started during, I think, Fireball, which Ian saw quite differently than Blackmore did.
Should be singing all the time. He would always be walking around, you play this, you play that, and you play that. And there'd be lots of growling going on. And in the end, he was told in no uncertain terms to stick to his guitar playing, and we would all stick to what we did individually, and then we'd soon find out if it was working or not.
Gillan's occasional tendency to overindulge in a certain Scottish tipple was also causing tempers to fray.
Those Fireball writing sessions, I mean, to me, were characterised by his drinking. He drank a lot in those days. Bottle of scotch a day. Easy. Which didn't help matters.
The band were holed up in an eerie old house in Devon to write the album.
Richie was always very big on ghosts and things like that. So he would do these noises in the night and stuff like that. They're caused by hidden amplifiers in the attic and feedback, and everybody knew what was going on, but it kept him happy. So, and I guess we must have got something done, because Fireball turned out to be a really important album. Yeah, we were still very close at that time. It wasn't a problem at all.
In the Casino, a studio album called Made in Switzerland, or Machine had one of the two titles, was not decided, and then also do a live album in the Casino in late December with the crowd.
The last show of the season was going to be Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention playing at the Casino, which used to be over there, where that tall building is. And we came along, we had everything set up to move in as the town virtually closed down for the winter. We went to see the Frank Zappa show, and that's when it all really happened. Somebody came in with a flare gun in the middle of the show. He shot from right over my right shoulder. And we saw these two sort of incandescent balls, and they just went and fizzed out. They seemed to fizz out, but they hit the electric trunking and set something off. And before long, the place was well alight. The show obviously got stopped. People scattered, and there was a bit of panic, but Frank was brilliant, got the people out. Unfortunately, some jumped through windows, and some ran into the kitchens, which were underground. And that's when Claude Nobbs, Funky Claude as he's known in the song, led them to safety through the smoke.
witnessed the whole thing minute by minute until the building went to the ground, and they saw me going out of the building like a captain of a ship. I was the last one to go out.
The flames went up 200-300 feet, and the downdraft from the mountains started blowing the smoke all across Lake Geneva. And we sat and watched this, and Roger wrote down smoke on the water on a napkin. And
in a couple of days we moved into another place, but the police stopped us after one song, said you're keeping the whole town awake. That song was called Title Number 1, otherwise known as the Dan Dan song, according to Ian Gillan. And of course that became Smoke on the Water, but at that time it didn't have any lyrics.
We were halfway through a take when the police arrived, and the roadies were barricading the doors so that we could finish the take. I remember that, and I remember Ian going out and very charmingly taking the heat out of the situation with the police.
we had this entire floor, and the drums would be on the landing, and various speakers and instruments in various bedrooms to get a degree of natural separation.
So every night they would come and they would bring some tapes and we would listen to the tapes. And one night they said, Claude, we wrote a song about you and about the casino. It's called Smoke on the Water. And they played it. I said, that's going to be a hit. They said, do you think so? A story about a fire is going to be a hit? Said, well, but the melody, the hook on it, boom, boom, boom.
I think that Ritchie, in his wildest flights of antagonism, couldn't have said too much against anything that Ian did on Machine Head. I think his contribution is startlingly good. Things like Space Trucking are, are just terrific. It was a very quick, quite elegant, slightly dark album. If you listen back to it now, it's got a slight dark intensity underneath it. I can't put it any better than that. But it was a happy album to make.
Machine Head pushed Deep Purple into the stratosphere. It shifted millions of copies and inspired a new generation of budding singers and guitarists.
I mean, I used to just blast it out, go away to Spain, and just after a few sherbets, go back to the villa and just go nuts.
Yeah, very unique very powerful, screamy. I mean, the band was, I mean, the ultimate of what that type band was supposed to be at the time, you know. Nobody could come anywhere near them on stage.
The band was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the interior politics were getting more and more explosive. By the time we'd finished Machine Head, I think it was pretty uncomfortable between those two.
And then we all started getting with long-term serious girlfriends or whatever. And the communication became even more difficult because then I think some of the girls fell out with each other. So then you want to go to the bar and have a drink with your musician friend and say you were crap tonight. But you can't because he's staying in a different hotel. And even if you were, he'd be on the other side with his girlfriend and you'd be on this side with your girlfriend or with your group of circle of friends as they would become. And from being, I wouldn't say friends, but we got on pretty well. We did get on very well, and being roommates and getting the best I think we could out of a relationship. It went to the point where it was quite confrontational.
By 1973, Purple were outselling everyone, from Zeppelin to Elvis and even the Beatles. Keen to exploit the massive demand, the managers booked tour upon tour upon tour.
The pressure of work was just so astronomical. We didn't even realise it was going on, but we was all starting to go a bit loopy. I mean, the work was incessant. The partying was probably a little bit too heavy. And people just lost touch with everything.
On stage, the rivalry between Gillan and Blackmore was reaching flashpoint.
Don't come into my part of the stage. If you do, I'm going to smack you with my guitar. And then I'm thinking, this has to be resisted. I'm not going to get shoved around. And I realised my mic stand was much longer than his guitar, so we actually had a pitched battle on stage with mic stands and guitars. At which point I made the point, you know, it's my job to go from left to right. I'm not just going to talk to the audience on that side of the stage. I'm going to talk to the audience wherever it is. I'm not going to walk in front of you when you're doing a solo or anything like that.
As tempers frayed, the band was hit by illness. It was hardly the ideal atmosphere in which to record the follow-up to Machine Head. Even a stint in Rome failed to convert confrontation to creativity.
The band turned up and we sat around making silly songs, and there was no sign of the banjo player. And when he turned up, he didn't stay in the same house as the rest of the band, and he was very aloof at that time and distant.
They didn't talk at all. I mean, maybe a grunt, hello, as they passed. But there was no communication whatsoever. And I think it hurt both of them. I mean, it hurt us a lot.
And for an incredible expense and a very long, dispiriting time in Rome, we recorded 2 songs, Woman from Tokyo and Painted Horse, as well as a couple of rude little ditties that the rest of us sang without guitar playing. And it wasn't a waste of time, but it was the beginning of the end.
Think We Are was eventually completed, with Gillan and Blackmore recording their contributions separately. It included a love song with a difference.
Smooth Dancer is a love song, basically, if you read between the lines. It's a song about Richie, where I'm saying how great you are, if only.
In terms of sales, the album was another massive success, but from the band's point of view, it failed to match the magic of Machine Head.
Ian got darker during this period. He got more and more introvert, more and more inward, more less. The smile came less often, and he grew that big black beard because he wanted somehow to hide himself. You know, not a good time.
Things just naturally progressed towards complete and total combustion.
I remember on a couple of occasions in America when Richie just refused to do an encore for no particular reason that anyone else could see. Anyone in the band, let alone anyone in the audience, like, what have we done wrong? You know, I mean, we have applauded for 2 hours. Why won't they do an encore? And it's always, why won't they do an encore? You know, I mean, the audience never sees it's just one recalcitrant sod who wants to, you know, lock himself in his dressing room and say, I'm not going to do it, you know. And I remember on several occasions racing for Richie's dressing room and being beaten only by Ian Gillan, who was a lot swifter than I was. And pounding on the door saying, come out, let's get back on stage, you know. And so we would go back on and, generally speaking, and do Smoke on the Water without the guitar. So I learned to play the riff quite well on the organ.
It became from being a thing of joy to an absolute nightmare, to the point where I'd get sick in my stomach. Noon on the day of a show, that would be it. I didn't deal with it very well, but, you know, I'd have perhaps much too much to drink before I went on stage and just treat the whole thing with a sort of arrogant disdain.
Ian had gone off on his own course. I mean, he had his own roadie, his own travel arrangements, own hotels, everything. And there was not a lot of communication in those days.
And the reason for that, I guess, is to try and keep your own direction, to try and keep your own self-esteem, if you like. When to go the other way would be to submit.
Annoying, so annoying that these two grown men with such talents were feuding in such a pointless way. Very sad, but out of it all came some great music.
Richie's going through the same thing, don't forget. I mean, I'm only talking about my universe, from where I'm standing. So Richie sees it completely differently.
The rift grew deeper as Purple continued their touring onslaught. The band, now the most successful in the world, began to self-destruct.
The behemoth of the trundling great war machine that is Deep Purple, and this tour after tour after tour, and nobody seems to care anymore. And you're playing massive arenas and everything's wonderful, and yet something's missing from the future. You suddenly think, I don't care so much about this at the moment. In fact, I don't care if it just falls to pieces, because I don't really have a sense of purpose anymore. And because we're all so spread out, I don't really have a sense of belonging anymore. And so those two crucial elements have gone from your life, which may prompt you to write a letter saying I'm resigning. We had dates in for about 9 months. I think I wrote the letter probably 9 months before I left on the 30th of June, 1973. And that was it.
I don't think Richie expected that. Whether he was actually pleased with it or not, he would have to answer that. And he certainly didn't seem to object.
During that period, not one person in the band or the management tried to change my mind. So it convinced me I was doing the right thing.
And we're all grown-ups to a certain extent. And if you make a monumental decision like that, then it's something you must have thought about. What's to say after that? I'm sorry you're going. It's been great. Your decision. What else can I do, you know?
We didn't seem like friends from episode 6 anymore. I felt closer to John Lord and Ian Pace.
Filling the support slot on the tour was the band Elf, led by Ronnie James Dio.
This was a time when Ian, I think, was just about to leave the band. He was not a happy man at the time. I remember the first night that he came, he turned up in a limo about 30 seconds before the gig started, rushed on the stage, did his work, and at the end of it, by the time before the last note was hit, he was back gone again. And so I didn't really get a lot of chance to talk to Ian.
Prior to that, it was Richie that wouldn't do the encore. Now it was Ian Gillan that wouldn't do the encore.
Blackmore also threatened to quit. He was eventually persuaded to stay, but only if Glover was fired. The last show took place in Osaka, Japan. After the gig, fans laid waste to the arena.
Roger flew home with me, and he was pretty depressed at the time. I think he was going through his own thing. You know, Roger and I had been so close, but, you know, I suddenly realised on that flight home we'd hardly spoken. We'd gone our separate ways. As far as I was concerned, it was a relief to get it over with. I mean, it was no more the exciting thing that it had been when I joined the band. When I left Purple, I decided that was going to be the end of my singing career, because I figured I've been so lucky, what more can I do? After this, what else is there? And I was still only, well, 27 years old, and I'd been through a lot by then.
Meanwhile, Deep Purple carried on without Gillan or Glover. Blackmore had always been a fan of Paul Rodgers from Free, but the singer declined the invitation to join.
When they announced that David Coverdale was going to be the new singer, and Glenn, bass player, it was almost as if it was just shut out of my mind. If you can draw the analogy of getting a divorce and then being very publicly asked to witness your ex with another partner, and that's the only way I can describe it.
As Burn hit the shelves, Ian Gillan vowed never to return to the music business. Freed from the shackles of stardom, he found he now had time to burn and money to spend. Or was that the other way around?
Money really was not something that I really knew what to do with. I did spend it very foolishly in the end, all of it. It didn't start off being foolishly spent, it's ended up being foolishly spent. I thought, well, I've been living in hotels now for most of my professional life, and I'm feeling a bit lost without one, so maybe I'll build a hotel. And I found a derelict building in North Stoke, Wallingford. Spent the next couple of years doing it up. I put in an acoustic guitar-shaped swimming pool, which is quite famous. Around about that time, finances got pretty sticky, and I suddenly found out, having been told everything was fine, that I'd run out of money. So I had to come back and sign papers to put everything into liquidation and start all over again. The accounts were quite peculiar, but there you go, that's what it was. The house went, the car went, hotel went, motorcycle company went. And there with it went the dreams and the plans.
As his business plans crashed around him, Ian began to wonder if giving up singing had been a good decision after all. But soon there was a glimmer of hope on the horizon.
Roger Glover phoned me up fortuitously and said, help. I've got a show in, I think, 2 days, 3 days' time at the Royal Albert Hall. And one of the singers has dropped out.
There was no announcements. There was no, and now Ian Gillan. There was nothing like that. He walked out on the stage and just the place rose and just gave him a standing ovation. It was amazing. Very touching moment.
I went home next morning, picked up my guitar, wrote 3 songs, and started making some phone calls. And that's basically how I got back into it, because I realized, I think, that I'd made a wrong decision. I thank Roger, as always, for his important parts that he's played in my life. It was great. It was a miracle, really. So I then went on and just headbanged my way through the rest of the 70s and the 80s.
The core of the Ian Gillan Band was formed from the debris of the players brought together by Roger Glover for the Butterfly Ball. They were some of the most talented musicians of the time, but were keen to experiment with jazz-rock fusion.
It took me in a new direction, a direction I'd not explored before.
Ian hired a talented young keyboardist named Colin Towns to complete the lineup.
I did the audition, and I just thought, at the time, the musicians were absolutely incredible, and I thought, I've just got to be in this band, you know. Just when he walked on stage and the reaction he would get, and just to do a scream, I know it sounds like a bit, oh yeah, another scream, but, and he probably came back from all those early rock and roll things where he first started doing those things, for sure, but it didn't matter. There was a kind of spine-chilling moment from all of that.
I started producing them, and it was almost unproducible. I mean, it was a chaotic band. It was all practical jokes and flying eggs and getting drunk and craziness, but at the same time this strange kind of jazz fusion rock mixture, which Ian was desperately ambitious for, but I don't think really was his kind of music.
Unfortunately, it's hard to dance to. I remember very clearly a puzzled audience in Scandinavia trying to groove to our opening song that had a bass lick that went and they're all going, no, can't do it.
And the next album, I remember going down to rehearsals and listening to it, and I thought, they're not ready to do an album yet. It sounded too chaotic, and I said that, so I was consequently fired.
Clear Air Turbulence and the follow-up, Scarabus, continued the jazz rock sound that some fans failed to appreciate. Ian carried on funding the band, but that soon led to problems.
I was so puerile as a businessman. We got a check for 75 grand to make the record. I had the recording studio, and I thought, well, before I did anything, I said, well, to make good my promise, I made out 5 checks for 15 grand and handed them out. A couple of days later, I'm going, oh, God, we got to pay for the lights and sound for the tour, and I forgot to deduct anything for the studio costs and everything. So I said, sorry, guys, but why don't we each bump in like 3 grand or whatever, and that'll cover it for the time being, you know. And Ray Fenwick said, you must be joking, I'm not paying to play. And that was my first indication of how things were going to go. But I'm a slow learner.
I started writing my own stuff, and I came in one day and I said to him, well, can I play your song? So I played him Fighting Man.
They wouldn't listen to an idea that Colin had, and he was kind of a bit fed up about this.
There have been times when he has been a fighting man, if you like. He's fought his corner and he's fought to survive and he's fought to make this happen and that happen.
On the kind of street that makes you wonder. Got a face that tells the life of city thunder.
It was beautiful. And Colin's an extraordinarily talented man. They all are. But they wouldn't listen to him, and so I said, well, we're leaving. So I wanted to do it as politely as possible. I didn't want to fire anyone, so I left my own band.
Fighting Man became the closing track on Mr. Universe. There was a new band, a new attitude, and a shorter name.
There was a unique energy in the band. It was very peculiar. I still don't know where McCoy came from or why he was there, but he looked great, didn't he?
The punk-tinged Mr. Universe smashed its way into the charts. Straight away, they were signed by Virgin Records, where Ian's future wife was working.
The advent of punk and new wave music, I think Virgin were starting to worry just a tad about artists on the label. But in actual fact, I think Ian probably saved the label.
The band was great, I think, at that time, and it continued probably through the next album, Glory Road, and started to get a bit thinner by the next one.
The Gillan band was soon lauded as being at the vanguard of the new wave of British heavy metal, along with Saxon, Iron Maiden and Def Leppard.
Heavy metal's probably the least flattering description of any form of music that I've ever heard of. I'd rather be called a racket than heavy metal, because we have been a racket sometimes.
Shambolic would be a great way of describing the Gillan band, but I bet it was a lot of fun. I bet it was a lot of fun.
But despite the success, the money still failed to flow, and Ian found himself in financial difficulties. It was at this time that the singer became close friends with one of Deep Purple's biggest fans, George Best.
George Best. Fetching headband Ian Gillan.
As well as the occasional charity kick-around, they also used to meet for games of pool in a London club.
We used to hang out in there, have a couple of drinks together and have a game of pool and just enjoy ourselves.
We used to play for £1 a game.
Yeah, so that was probably when I first learned not to gamble when you're playing pool.
Double or quits was George's favourite saying. Well, he was a big double or quits person.
I'd gone bankrupt. I'd had business problems. I think we could both in those days afford to have a couple of quid on a bet.
Some drinks arrived. The waiters said, they think you're playing for £1 a game out there. And we wondered what the hubbub was. And so, having won a few games, double or quits, said George. I said, yeah, OK. And so there were murmurs going around, they're playing for 32 grand. Well, it was only 32 quid. And he won that game, so we ended up quits anyway.
We were just two guys enjoying ourselves and enjoying each other's company. And keeping our eye out for any pretty women that were around, of course.
We went to leave and asked for the bill, and a member had paid for the bill and apparently said, thank you very much for, you've never seen such excitement and such nonchalance and with so much money at stake.
The day Gillan played Bestie in a charity match was an historic moment in the history of soccer.
Somebody scored those two fantastic goals.
Fantastic goals or flukes? The jury's still out on that one.
Well, it wasn't a fluke. The first one was obviously not a fluke.
The game was shown on TV. Sadly, the only copy that survives is Ian's own ageing VHS tape.
I lobbed it, and it was a goal from the moment it left my boot to the moment it went in the back of the net. And there was Paul Mariner and George Best waiting to head it in, and they got nowhere near it.
George Best died a few months after giving this interview.
Many fond memories of George, and he was a diamond geezer, a true diamond geezer.
The Gillan band went from strength to strength, but try as he might, Ian couldn't escape his past.
Well, there was a knock on the door one Christmas Eve, and there, standing about 6 feet back from the door, in the snow, in his pilgrim's hat, all in black, was the man in black. I said, "Richie, hello, what do you want?" He said, "I'm looking for a singer." I said, "Well, why are you standing like that?" He said, "I thought you might hit me." I said, "Why would I do that? Come in." So he came in and we had a drink, and he wanted me to join Rainbow. And I said, "Well, I've got my own band, and, you know, I mean, if a vacancy comes up there, why don't you come and join my band?" And there again, we got right back to the nub of what the problem was in Purple, because he went in the direction of Rainbow and I went in the direction of Gillan. I mean, I suppose from the outside it may not seem that different, but there was quite a difference in the approach.
But Blackmore persevered and even joined Ian on stage at Gillan shows.
And he came along and jammed with us at the Marquee, and he came along again and jammed with us at the Rainbow. And said again, you know, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Nah, I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. I don't want to be the singer in Rainbow. Thank you. But thanks for the invitation." And it was left at that.
The Gillan band continued their grueling touring schedules and were all taken by surprise when they were offered a slot on the primetime UK TV show Top of the Pops. But some members didn't want to do the show.
Well, put it this way, I'm going to do it. And because I believe it's the right thing to do. And if you don't come, you don't come. It's your decision. But I'll have somebody else in the band to replace you.
Bernie Tormey called Ian's bluff and ducked out of the show. But Ian wasn't bluffing. The band went on Top of the Pops, minus a guitarist. And the next day, Yannick Gers was recruited to the ranks.
And Bernie was replaced with Yannick. And Yannick brought his boundless energy and enthusiasm and showmanship into the band, which meant that all the elements that Bernie had were replaced. It was just a different personality.
The new lineup decided to retire to a tiny village in southwest England to write and rehearse their next album. The event was captured by a local news crew.
Of course, there are discos in the village hall, and it has been known for people to get a little noisy at one of the weekly whist drives. But recently, all that's changed.
Rehearse in London, in the studio in London. But after you spent an hour and a half driving through the traffic, and you then go down into a basement and you're locked away from the sun all day, and you're like that at the end of the day. And I think we've got more done in 4 or 5 days here than we would normally have got done in 2 weeks. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. We must have got about 6 new songs half written already.
In about 5 days.
Ian was still being dogged by financial problems, and the rest of the band began to wonder where all the money was going.
Rock millionaire, I was described as. I'd never been a millionaire in my life. And I think, yeah, there was a general perception that I was hiding something, or I had more money than I was, or I should have supported things more. I don't know, but I couldn't. I was on the verge of bankruptcy at the time. I mean, my Deep Purple royalties had been stopped for something like 5 years. And the band wasn't earning enough to pay its way.
There wasn't enough money coming in from the albums because we kept making them, 2 albums a year. So by the time you got one advance, you'd move on to the next album. And then you go on to the next tour. And then we went to America and lost money because we were trying to crack America. All the time, the band got paid. I'd like to see one of them put their hand up and say they never got paid. They always got paid.
I know that there was always a shortage of money, but nobody knew why. And after 10 albums, I was still in my council house.
Ian was under immense pressure because he was financing the whole thing, so the bank were on his back. They were threatening to take his house away, the studio. And I think that and the amount of work he was doing brought on the throat problems. He told the band that was it. They were going to split up, he was going to take a year off. And it ended on December the 17th. Very sad night.
Well, there was the threat of us losing our own equipment as well. I mean, that was all I had, was some equipment out of the band. That was it. So we all had different vans at the back door and tried to get away as quickly as possible in case somebody came along and took it, because you never know, do you? You know, perhaps there was money owed somewhere. We never knew. A few odd things happened, but we never really knew. So we loaded up our own little vans and disappeared, which is pretty sad end to the band. He did leave a trail of unhappy musicians, which is a shame.
What can you do? I've got no regrets about those things.
There were nasty things said, nasty things happening, which made me realise that despite the amount of time that these guys had been working with Ian, that they didn't really know him at all. They obviously envisaged and pictured him as a totally different person. He was really upset by what they said.
It was a hard thing for everyone to have to deal with. And I think a lot of it was misunderstood. But I think a lot of people thought that I was already planning to join Purple. I did tell the guys that we'd had a meeting, but nothing came of it.
He came over to America to see Richie and I, and Bruce. He said, I've talked to John, I've talked to Pacey, and they're up for doing it, and how about a Purple reunion?
It got talking well, and it was very loose, and a few drinks was had, and then an argument started, and Ian, if I remember correctly, tipped over a bucket of ice over Richie's head, who then ran out the restaurant, and Ian ran out after him and, you know, bared his arse, and that was the end of those first Deep Purple discussions.
It was a shock to me when the Black Sabbath thing came along. It was a shock to my manager. I got a phone call from Tony Iommi saying, you fancy a drink? So we met halfway between where I lived and where he lived, and we went to the Bear in Oxford.
I think we got there about lunchtime or whatever it was. And of course the chat went on to 5, 6, 7. Before you know it, we were all legless, absolutely rotten.
Geezer Butler and I were under the table, as far as I remember. And somebody got me home. And I got a phone call from Phil Banfield, my manager, the next day, saying, Ian, if you're going to make these major decisions, career decisions, he said, I think we should talk about it first. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, apparently yesterday you agreed to join Black Sabbath. I said, well, I don't remember that.
The next thing we were doing, we were into rehearsal, writing an album.
So that's how it came about. And I made one record and did one tour. And it lasted about a year. And it was the longest party I've ever been to.
The newly formed Sabbath, dubbed Deep Sabbath by some, settled into Richard Branson's picturesque manor house in a quaint Oxfordshire village to make the album. But of course, Black Sabbath don't do quaint.
Well, there were quite a few things that happened during that time, including the night racing, the canal trips, the explosions, lots of explosions. We had a good pyrotechnics guy, Andy, who was, I don't know how he ever got licensed, but it was pretty incredible.
When we first got together, he says, of course I won't be sleeping in the house. I went, oh, right. He said, I should be in a tent outside. We thought, oh, yeah. Thought he was kidding, you know. And I drive up to the studio this first day, Richard Branson's house, and there's this huge marquee outside. Bloody hell, he's serious.
Geezer Butler, Bill Ward and Tony decided to welcome Ian to the band with a gentle wake-up call very early one morning.
We used to use all this explosions on stage, so we had all this stuff with us, so we put it all round his tent one night, buried it in the ground and put it all round. And we'd have obviously put too much stuff in. Bang, it went, and his tent went, whew. And not only that, all the concussion went through the lake, and all Richard Branson's prize fish come floating to the top. And there's Ian, of course, lying in his camp bed. We woke him up all right, yeah.
But of course Ian had served his time with professional pranksters like Ritchie Blackmore and John McCoy and was quick to take his revenge.
1 or 2 trout found their way from the lake into Bill Ward's wardrobe and remained there for a week or so, which is another good reason for camping outside.
Virgin tycoon Richard Branson would also occasionally turn up to check on his house guests.
Ian and Richard got on very well, and I think Richard probably had a few glasses of wine with Ian and they went out to play. Running around the manor, throwing snooker balls at the windows, breaking them, and I'm staying there thinking, you own this place. Hold on a minute.
The most deadly of the drunken pranks also inspired song lyrics.
Richard Branson had built a go-kart track, which was big enough to race a car on, but not big enough to overtake, so we decided one night we were going to do time trials.
Oh no, we bought 4 cars for the band at the time that we could use on a tour and running around, you know. Brand new cars.
We had a little drink.
We went out and we got pissed again, you know.
So I said, I'll go first.
So off he goes round this track. Instead of using his own car, he took Bill's car. And Bill's was actually the best car. He had the best car out of all of us.
I did a load of laps, and I was getting faster on each lap. And I must have clipped a tyre on the previous lap. And as I was hanging out and coming into this bend, there was no way up. And the car just flipped. And after flipping a couple of times, it was on its roof and it was spinning round and going along the track like that.
He almost killed himself, actually. If he'd have gone a bit further, he'd have gone into the pond, which was in the middle.
Are you all right? Yes, I'm fine. I was just getting out of this seatbelt, which is very difficult. The window was open and somebody said, oh, thank God you're all right. And reached for a cigarette. And everyone screamed, no, no, no. Because the fuel tank was ruptured and there was petrol everywhere, so had he lit a cigarette, that would have been fun too.
Ian wrote Trash the next day, and it's seen by many as the standout track on the album. Inevitably, Sabbath's antics soon began to disturb neighbours in the quiet village.
Next to the studio was a church. And so you can imagine what happened.
Suddenly looking through the control room, there was a priest there, a vicar.
They got a petition together and brought it round complaining about the noise we were making, you know.
And he said, I wondered if we could come to some arrangement. We have choir practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we can't pitch properly because we're hearing your very lovely music. Of course, we'll shut the door and we won't play anything loud while you're having your choir practice.
So then Ian wrote the lyrics to a song called Disturbing the Priest, you know.
For which Black Sabbath got run out of town in Mexico some years later because the local clergy took it as absolute irrefutable evidence that they were in fact devil worshippers. And I got a phone call from Al Dutton in the hotel saying, gotta go, we're being escorted to the airport. And I can see the crowd marching down the street. And so obviously they didn't quite get the picture.
Born Again is known as Sabbath's Marmite album. You either love it or hate it.
I love the album. I think it's fantastic. What I didn't like was the way it changed from what I was hearing on the monitors.
Before we knew it, it was number 4 in the British charts, and we heard a copy of it, and the sound was dreadful, you know.
Fingers crossed for a remix one day. I think it would do well if it was.
I'll be honest with you, we were touring Europe in '83, and we got a cassette of the album, and we heard this song called Zero the Hero, and the driver's side window went down, the eject button got hit, and the tape went out the window and went, what is this shit? His voice is way too subtle to go with the bludgeoning kind of chunky metal stuff that Sabbath do. It doesn't make sense. Never, it's weird. It might as well have had Kylie Minogue join.
And then we went on tour, the famous tour, which featured Stonehenge. Anyone got any idea for a stage set? And we're all mumbling and going, well, something earthy, I don't know, whatever. And Geezer said, Stonehenge. And the bloke said, well, that's a great idea. How do you visualise it? And Geezer said, well, life-size, of course.
When this thing first showed up, we go, bloody hell, this is it, you know. Where are we going to put this?
We probably weren't going to be able to actually get these things up on most stages in the world. As proved to be the case.
The life-size Stonehenge was just the first in a series of Spinal Tap-esque surprises that the manager, Don Arden, had in store for the band. The next one was a little smaller, though.
He said, I just want to introduce you to this chap. And we walked in the room, and there's this little chap with a red rubber suit on with eyes, and bloody hell. And it was the baby off the Born Again album.
Who appeared on top of the Stonehenge, miming to the sound of a baby's scream that was flanged, or phased, as it used to be called.
He'd get up and run across the small columns, which weren't small, they're probably 15 foot high.
We stood there in wonderment as this twisted dwarf managed to rise up in the middle and fall away to this echoing baby's scream onto a pile of mattresses.
And then jump into the front of the stage and go like this, and his eyes would light up.
At which point the cue was for the roadies to come out dressed as druids, with their cowls and their chains and their long robes and their nice Reeboks underneath, which you could see. And they would then somberly walk across the stage in procession to the sound of a low bell tolling. At which point we're supposed to go on and open the show. And I'm creased in laughter. And we went, this is ridiculous. And Don's going, nah, the kids will love it. You don't, you blokes know nothing about show business. So, and it's true.
And of course, you can imagine how that went down with the crew, because they absolutely hated him. Because he was a star, you know, he was one of the chaps off Star Wars, and he kept like, you know. So they hated it. So they'd done everything. They'd put him in boxes and hung him on the stage, and it was awful for him.
Definitely Spinal Tap. Ian wouldn't wear leather like the other guys, so he went and got a blanket and cut a hole in it and put it over his head, and that was his outfit.
I had great difficulty absorbing certain of Ozzy's lyrics. They just wouldn't go into my mind. So I had this book, a display book with plastic pages, and I wrote cues. I wrote the lyrics, actually, and I practiced turning the pages with my feet in my kitchen at home before I went away. And it worked very well. So this was all part of the plan. So we started off the show, and the baby in full costume now, the dwarf, started crawling. We were looking through the wings, and I mean, the audience was am I seeing this? The dwarf reached the middle behind the drums and duly fell off backwards. And the bell started tolling, and the druids came out. But the screaming hadn't stopped. And this time it was real, because somebody had removed the mattresses.
We were in stitches. I mean, it was so hard to try and go on and do the show after this.
I suddenly realised it's my turn to actually go on and sing, and I cannot remember the first line of the first song. It's all too much for me. And I wasn't prepared for this shoulder-high wall of dry ice that came out at a speed faster than I was walking. And so I did a little skip, and it overtook me still. And I realise now that I'm standing shoulder-high in dry ice, staring at an audience that's just witnessed what it's seen.
And he had his hair down like this, going like this, and he goes, trying to see the lyrics. Oh, dear.
But at that point, the floor lights came on and blinded me. It was built into the stage. So eventually I managed to get the first line, and I stand up and sing the first line, but I don't know the second, so I'm going down again. It's unbelievable.
The sellout tour went on for the rest of the year, but many fans, both of Sabbath and Purple, gave Ian a hard time.
It's very difficult to have to front another major band, you know, and sing their songs. And I thought he'd done really well.
I belong to Purple, really, not to Black Sabbath. Ozzy belongs to Black Sabbath. In the minds of the public, that's how it is, and I don't think you can ever escape that. So I merely went home where I belonged, really, I think, and that was destiny.
Despite the earlier aborted attempts to get Purple back together, Gillan refused to give up and tried again in 1983.
So this time we went for a meeting and I made sure that Ian stayed sober. So at least we'd had a proper discussion about it. And, yeah, they reformed.
Early '83, he actually came up to the house. I wasn't really aware that he knew where I lived. But he actually came up and knocked on the door, you know, almost like, can I borrow a cup of sugar? But instead of that, it was, would you like to reform the band? You know? My first question was, well, what a great idea, yes, but what about Blackmore? He said, oh yeah, he said, yeah.
We agreed that we would go to somewhere secret and have an attempt to see if we could recapture any of the magic. And if it didn't work, we were going to just not bother if we couldn't make music again. So we went to Stowe in Vermont and rented a house, and the gear turned up, and within minutes in the basement there were logs on the fire and everyone was sitting around jamming, and it sounded great. And everyone's looking around going...
The electricity in the air about what was possible was great. And everybody came in with a smile, including the man in black. Came in with a smile and handshakes and just the possibilities that were in front of us.
became a partnership again. We found each other, if you like, after many years of being apart.
At that point, everything was tickety-boo.
And I remember us sitting around thinking, I wonder how it is when they're all in the same room, you know. It's got to be difficult, you know. But, you know, you can put your differences aside for the right reasons. I mean, the cynical people, you know, say, destiny brought us back together. And then there's always somebody going, no, it didn't, it was the bank manager.
I wasn't that much worried about Richie. I'd assumed that he'd gone through the same growing up process that I had, and it didn't even occur to me that Richie's head wouldn't be in the right place.
I remember buying it on vinyl. I remember putting Knocking at Your Back Door on, first track, and hearing that intro with the kind of like Jaws theme kind of guitar with a bow thing, thinking, wow, this is a bit good.
There were no differences of opinion musically, socially, personally, and everything was going along far too easily.
Gillan was the court jester by this time. I mean, he was funny, very funny.
He came in his baggy old tracksuit and sat down, and for about 2 or 3 we got a drink, and it was very quiet. And he sort of wriggled like this, and, oh, bloody hell. Put his hand down his trousers, and he pulled out a book. Get there. Hang on, what's that? Bits and pieces of paraphernalia. Eventually, a candelabra came out, and he's surrounded by all this crap. In the end, the whole of the pub were just holding their sides in laughter. What the hell's going to come out of the tracksuit next? But the candelabra was brilliant. It was huge. It was like this. It was like watching a magician work. It was the funniest thing.
The recording sessions were caught on camera by Bruce Payne, Purple's manager.
By this time, he had definitely embraced this thing about doing as much as possible of his life naked. You know, do you want to come around for a drink? Yes, you'd say. You'd go around after a day in the studio, and there would be Mr. and Mrs. Gillan stark naked in the lounge. Come in! You know, well, it's hi, you know, hi. Great fun. Because that frightened Blackmore's witless. I mean, he wouldn't go within a mile of the place. He kept saying, they've never got any clothes on. What are you supposed to do?
Once too often, I think Richie was having a meal, quiet meal in the restaurant, and Ian Gillan wandered through with no trousers on or something like that. And it just...
This was Ian in full flight in the 80s. He was manic and brilliant and immensely funny, achingly funny. Took a little bit of a toll on his performances. You know, some nights he was a little ragged as the year wore on and as we got into 86.
I mean, that album went fine. And there were little Richie, Ian problems here and there, but nothing that couldn't be solved. When the tour started, it started to get a little tackier. I mean, the business was superb. Everything was selling out and then some. We were doing 2 and 3 shows where we expected to do 1 in each of the markets. And as it went on, Richie became more difficult, and Ian was more upset about Richie's being difficult.
The House of Blue Light failed to recapture the old magic like Perfect Strangers had. The songs, although well written, seemed to lack that spark that defined the spirit of the band. It was also a less comfortable album to make.
There was a most peculiar system of communication that was set up, and that is that if anyone had a gripe or a constructive comment or anything that would have normally been the pattern of or the subject of group conversation, it wasn't conveyed for the sake of not rocking any boats. It wasn't conveyed directly to each other. It was conveyed to Bruce Payne, our manager, which made his job more Machiavellian than it need ever have been.
The House of Blue Light may have failed to excite, but on stage, the band was still one of the best in the world.
The tour was going very well until the moment in the United States, I forget which town, it could have been in San Antonio or in the South somewhere, when Richie threw his guitar in the air and forgot where he put it. And it came down and broke his finger. And that was the end of the tour. And that was the end of that. I said to Rog, do you fancy making an album? And he said, well, we just finished. I said, well, I don't feel fulfilled. We went immediately to Montserrat and recorded Accidentally on Purpose, which was very fulfilling, one of my favourite albums of all time. It was the first time I got to make a whole record with my longtime buddy, Roger Glover, who inspired me to write in the first place and with whom I performed in various bands for a long time.
Beyond the happiness and pain, this place they call the clouds and rain. Is there someone somewhere waiting in the wings to take my place? Let's not drag it out like a kidney death scene.
When we came back to work on a new record, it was all over, really. I mean, we'd fragmented totally.
Richie didn't want to work with Ian anymore. Ian didn't want to work with Richie anymore, and that's, right back to '73 stuff.
We were back in Stowe in Vermont, not really producing much. The atmosphere was awful, and needless to say, I was no saint. I lost interest in what was going on, and I spent more time down the pub than I did in the rehearsal room.
Ian was, should we say, a little more like himself, and Mr. Blackmore was a little more like himself, which means that they were exactly never really close together personally, but they were moving apart.
Ian's never on his best behavior. I'm not even sure what his best behavior is, but certainly not then. He was a party animal, certainly. But I'm not sure it comes from a lack of professional attitude. I think it becomes one of those situations where if you so dislike band members you're playing with, then you have a tendency to do something else, party animal in his case. Yeah, there was sufficient reason for the rest of the band to be pissed off at him. No question about it.
It was very similar to '73. There was nothing that seemed to be right, apart from the individuals, but the collective spirit of the band wasn't happy at the time.
And I think it was probably all down to the fact that Richie was starting to just take over. And Richie's a clever guy. He's a very patient man. He'll take his time to get what he wants. And sometimes, you find that you've been painted into a corner and you don't know how you got there. I think probably Ian saw it coming before we did and wasn't happy about it.
There was a lot of push for the music to take a certain direction again, which didn't seem to be blues-based to me, or it didn't seem to be really the kind of rock that I understood.
Richie called a meeting one night and said, I can't work with Ian Gillan anymore. The music's not happening. There's no songs coming. And no one could disagree with him, because that was the truth. I said, well, give me 3 days. I can't go along with it, because I think it's wrong, but give me 3 days. If I don't come up with one song in 3 days with Ian, then I'll throw my lot in with you. And basically that's what happened. John, Pacey and Richie disappeared overnight without a word to Ian. Ian hadn't got a clue what was going on. And I remember meeting him in the studio for a writing session, and he said, where's everyone gone? I said, I don't know. He said, they didn't say goodbye. Anyway, for 3 days I really tried. I came up with idea after idea, lyric after lyric, tried to get something going, at the end of which we didn't have a song. And so I reluctantly met the others and said, well, have you got a song? I said, no. So that was that. Ian got the call. You're no longer wanted in the band. Yeah, sad situation.
And we all went for it. We all made a mistake. We should never have gone for it. Because when it came down to a him or me scenario, the three of us should have had the balls to say, no, that's not the way it's going to be. You know, it's not you calling the shots, it's not Ian calling the shots, it's 5 people in the band here. What we should have said again was, let's just go and leave each other alone for 3 or 4 months. Let's just stop right now. Let's just give everybody some breathing space and just get back to being real again. But for the second time in our careers, we didn't do that. And of the 2 evils at the time, Richie's seemed to be the lesser. In hindsight, it was probably the far more dangerous one.
It could quite easily be said that it was my fault, and I wouldn't argue with that. I, of course, would defend myself by saying I didn't want to be the leader of the band. I didn't want to dominate the band, and I didn't want to do anything other than have everyone have their say, as it used to be in the early days. If you were standing somewhere else, you'd say, well, that's all very well for Ian Gillan to say that, but he wants the band to be blues-based and rock-based and that sort of thing, and not go in the direction of Richie's idea of what became Rainbow. I mean, that wasn't my idea of a good time.
And I called him up a week or so after he'd had the call from the manager. And I said, look, you know, I couldn't stop this, but I don't want to lose your friendship. He said, no, I don't want to lose yours either. I said, well, I'll keep in touch, but we just can't talk about Purple.
We all played a part in all of this. It was just that I think probably Richie was the only guy that had the balls to say it's him or me. I didn't even have that. I just banged my fist on the table and said things have got to change. You know, I didn't offer my resignation.
When Ian decided to leave in '73, it was something which he did. When that chaos happened in the 80s, late 80s, that never really needed to happen. It was much easier to replace a guitar than replace a voice, as it would be a drum kit, a keyboard player. A voice by nature is unique, and you have to really know what you've got and defend it.
It didn't take long for Ian to pick himself up, dust himself down and form another band. The next album was packed full of scathing lyrics.
Ain't no good luck, I missed the good luck turn. Ain't no good luck, babe, I missed the good luck turn. All my life, you put my heart in misery. Ain't been too good to me, babe, and now you're history. So close,
experience he probably had to go through. You know, when you look back on their lives, it was something that was probably inevitable. And that sacking probably shocked him more, but at the same time also spurred him on.
I think it was good for him to actually go straight from that situation into a creative writing situation with me. It was a kind of like, well, sod you, I'm doing this situation. And that comes out in some of the lyrics.
No good luck came my way. Nothing but bad luck. I've been led astray. Yeah, only got the break time. There's too much shine. Gonna stay in the shadow where I can clearly see.
He went off and did his bands and his tours, and he toured every village in Russia. And it was good for him, I think, to do that. I think in retrospect, people say things happen for a reason. You know, I think it was a positive result for him. Disastrous 3 years for Deep Purple. Did an album with a singer that we shouldn't have done. It's not that it's a bad album, it just wasn't Deep Purple, wasn't what people conceive of as Deep Purple. And it was also Ritchie becoming too powerful in his musical direction.
Ian was the first Western rock artist to do a comprehensive tour behind the Iron Curtain.
The first gig we did at the Moscow Olympic Stadium, full house, and at the front of the stage with a KGB facing the audience with their batons like this, right? There was no support act, there was no music beforehand. We walked on and opened up with Black Knight. The place just went bonkers, right? As the drummer was going, the batons were banging their heads in time to the drums. It was just hilarious. It was mayhem, absolute mayhem. In the end, the power of the crowd was too much for, and they just let them enjoy themselves.
We then embarked upon a tour across the republics and the Warsaw Pact countries and the Baltic states. It was quite incredible. Some places had never heard of Deep Purple or anything else. They just knew that there was a Western artist travelling in places where no Western artist had been before. And in some football stadiums, whole villages turned out.
They knew Ian for Deep Purple, yeah, but for also Jesus Christ Superstar. That was as big in their minds as Deep Purple. And it was just unbelievable, you know, it was like the coming of the Messiah.
Deeply asleep in the middle of the night, in a warm climate, lying naked, when I became aware of a presence. And I opened my eyes. I had very long hair at the time. And my bed was surrounded by old ladies, mothers and children, about 8 of them, staring down at me. And I suddenly realized that the babushka, who has the key to all the rooms on the hotel floor, had heard about me being the first Jesus Christ, which it probably got mistranslated. I wasn't actually the first Jesus Christ. I was the first Jesus Christ in Jesus Christ Superstar. And so they thought I was JC, in reality. Religion not being a big thing in that part of the world, so they just came to have a look. And it was a moment, quite a moment.
The Mammoth Tour took Ian to Armenia just a short while after the devastating earthquake, which killed tens of thousands of people.
I met this old lady, and she'd lost every member of her family, and she just was standing there weeping and still dazed.
Ian was at the forefront of organising a charity album to help the people of Armenia.
It was hard work putting all those people together. I remember Brian Adams, the reason he was on the record was he happened to be just walking past the studio that day, and Ian grabbed him and pulled him in. The next thing he's on the record.
And the Live Aid Armenia album was the biggest selling record of its kind in the UK.
We won't go on unless Ian's back in the band. There's only one singer for this band, and it's Ian Gillan. He's the voice of Deep Purple. It's what makes those songs work.
Which, of course, presented two problems, which is how do you get him back? How do you talk him into coming back in a band that just fired him? And how do you talk the guitar player into allowing you to do that even if you could?
That was the start of about a year to 18 months of horrible politics, of trying to get Ian Gillan back in the band, Richie refusing, trying other singers in the meantime, getting nowhere.
Ian was busy forging ahead with his new band Repo Depot, with Extra Power guitarist Dean Howard and Lenny Hayes of Y&T. But Ian began to suspect that Depot were being subjected to a subtle campaign of sabotage.
And all of a sudden, dates were being cancelled, and there was a little bit of something going on behind the scenes to make my career a little bit difficult. Because not everything's positive in this life. And I got to find out about it, and I was pretty angry. But the reason for it was to put me in a position of weakness so that I would willingly come back into Deep Purple, the band about which I had said I'd rather slit my throat than ever work in that band again.
But the pressure to get Ian back in Purple to record their 25th anniversary album was immense. His manager, Phil Banfield, pictured here with Ian, threatened to quit if he didn't rejoin. Ian eventually relented and agreed to come back.
And so I booked a studio. I went over for 3 days to work with him and to come up with the song that I didn't come up with for that 3 days before he got fired. And Richie called me about 2 days before I left, and I wasn't home. I got a message, and Richie never calls. So I called Bruce immediately. I said, Richie called me. He said, yeah, he's calling you up to tell you not to bother to go and see Ian Gillan because he's never going to allow him back in the band. I said, well, I didn't get the call. I'm going anyway because I have to. We had 3 days at a studio in Cookham, The Mill, and we came up with 3 songs, did demos of them all.
I said, right, when are we going to do the rest of the album? He said, well, I've got to send them back first and see if they're approved, which is when I found out. I said, you are joking. I've been auditioned. There you go.
Got back to America, sent them around to the rest of the band. Everyone was overjoyed. Richie said, I can't believe you want to work with that shit again.
There were a lot of business decisions and dealings made in getting Ian back into the band. Nothing that anybody would stand up in court to attest to, but, you know, all of a sudden, Ian was back in the band and Richie had taken away his objections.
Eventually, I got the call from Bruce. Richie said he'll have Ian back in the band if you'll change one song. I said, fine, fine.
No, Richie didn't give me a knife and say, live up to your promise. It was just difficult. And the battle did rage on.
By now, the Ian Gillan, Richie Blackmore rock riff had become a legend in itself.
I sat down with Ian and we had a really, really long talk about how it should be dealt with this time round, and a few decades on, of course. Hopefully being a bit more mature and a bit more sensible. That the best way to do it would be to ignore him.
It was eggshell time. I think both of them realised that we had a job to do, and that was to finish this album. And there was a sort of... They would talk to each other, but it would be very polite, and there was a certain amount of respect there.
It was made under the weirdest of circumstances. Some of the tracks were written while Jolin was still in the band, and then Ian had to come in and rewrite them. So some of them were in the wrong key, you know. But he made, I think, a terrific stab at it.
Of all the albums I've made, that's probably the biggest salvage job I ever achieved. The remains of a band with the remains of a former band, with the remains of a few songs, and somehow brought it all together and did The Battle Rages On. Just, you know, not a bad album, it's not one of our groundbreaking albums, but at least we did it.
But it was on stage where it quickly became clear just how deep the rift between Ritchie and Ian had gone.
I remember the first gigs we did, when the album was finished and we started touring. Ian went out of his way to go to Ritchie's room and try and be pally, you know, say, oh, you played great tonight, Rich, that sort of thing.
And I got some pleasure out of it, because I could see how much it infuriated him.
Ian's notorious for forgetting his lyrics on stage. So what he does, he makes a new one up. So each night you get a whole new lyric. So what? Doesn't matter. This used to drive Ritchie nuts. And then we get a situation where Ian might forget a word, and they go, well, Ritchie go, well, I'm not going to play if you can't remember the words. And then Ian go, well, I'm not going to sing if you're not going to play. And the rest of us are going, oh, here we go again. Here we go again. Yeah.
In arenas, we were playing to 40% crowds. And Ritchie's logic would be only to do 40% of the show, to punish the 40% who did turn up. He said, if they can't be bothered to turn up, I can't be bothered to play.
He would say the reason for not doing an encore in Gothenburg is because the audience was rotten in Stockholm, which made no sense to anybody and still doesn't. But it was that kind of ego trip that was going along at the time.
Matters came to a head after a gig in Philadelphia with a food fight in the dressing room. Oh, very rock and roll.
It's like the spaghetti western part of Deep Purple's career.
Someone, and it wasn't Ian Gillan, someone had loaded up Ritchie's plate with spaghetti, but a whole bunch of ketchup and, I mean, far too much sauce.
He'd taken it into his room and realised this and assumed it was me.
Well, I believe it was Ian. Nobody else would have done it.
Of course, Ritchie got mad and immediately assumed it was Ian Gillan that had done it.
Ritchie marched into the dressing room,
walked straight up to the table, across to the table, and I don't think he said much.
Think you're funny, don't you, or something of that ilk, and just planted this plate of spaghetti in Ian's face.
Just went poof,
whack, right in my face with this plate. So I'm covered in spaghetti, and the plate snapped.
Heard the whoa and the clatter, and I turned around, and Gillan's covered with this spaghetti and this bloody plate broken on the floor.
I just looked at Pacey and Roger, and I thought, oh, no, that's the end of this gig.
He's standing there going, come on then.
Ian stood up, trembling with anger, and I thought, he's got to hit him. I mean, what else could you do?
I think for just a few seconds, Ritchie Blackmore was in danger of losing his life.
When it came to violence, I mean, Ian's a big boy. Ritchie isn't.
And I walked up to him, and I was about to dismember him, and I realised this was... And then those words came back to me, the advice came back.
Don't be riled. Just don't be riled, because you'll do something you really, really regret.
So I just turned away and said, I don't want to hit you, Ritchie.
He came out, he was very, very calm indeed. Scary calm.
And I went into the other room and burst into tears of frustration and rage. It was the effect of penting up all this feeling that you should naturally turn around and just... I would have loved to have just broken his nose at that time, or something equally painful.
I think had he reacted as he normally would and lash out, which he had every right to do, it would have been all over then. But there was a wonderful piece of self-control.
Months later, he nearly apologised, but didn't quite. He accepted the fact that I didn't do it, which but didn't apologise virtually.
If you want, the spaghetti incident should be...
Ritchie tore up his Japanese visa and walked out and left the tour in Helsinki.
I mean, Ritchie quit 100% because he didn't want to work with Ian. Whether he regrets it now or not, I don't know, but that was the reason at the time.
John Lord, myself, Ian Pace and Roger Glover sitting, as we have done over the years, from time to time, with our heads in our hands going, oh, what do we do now? And it was very clear that there were two options, either quit or go on. And that very evening, we made the decision that we were going to carry on under any circumstances.
I think they both rubbed each other up the wrong way, probably. But I tend to see Ian as the slightly more injured party of the two. But what I don't want you to think is that I don't want to appear to have put everything at Richie's door. I still have a great deal of time for Richie. I think his contribution to rock has not yet been truly realised. And he's an astonishingly good guitar player.
Fantastic guitar player. Wonderful. Wonderful articulation. Great tone. But great problems.
I often wonder what would have happened to the band had they been mates. Where would we be? Would it still, obviously it wouldn't have gone the same way, but my God, we would have conquered the world, I think.
I was at home when my manager called and said, you know, I got this really weird idea. A call came in. How would you like to replace Ritchie Blackmore in Deep Purple? And I went, you know, don't ever call me again with those crazy ideas, you know. I hung up the phone, but I couldn't help thinking, but it's Deep Purple. I would get to play with one of my favorite bands. And so I called him back and I said, you didn't call those guys back and say, you know, that I turned them down. And he said, no, we've been just waiting for you to call back. I'm sort of like the lucky fan that got a chance to jump into the band. And I felt really good that I wasn't keeping any of those negative things going. If anything, they probably thought I was far too happy.
Like always, the first show was so exciting because you didn't know what was going to happen. It gets very dangerous up there.
We got to the end of the show and I realized smoke on the water was coming up. And until then, I was quite professional about the whole thing. And then all of a sudden I started to think, and it was the little voice in my head said, you know, look, there's Ian Pace, and there's Roger Glover, John Lord, and, you know, and there's Ian Gillan, and oh my God, I'm playing with Deep Purple. And I'm about to play Smoke on the Water, that song that, you know, every guitar player, when they play, they close their eyes and they dream that they're in Deep Purple, you know. And I don't know how much time had passed, but all of a sudden I realized as my daydream kind of fizzled and I came back to reality, there's Ian's just standing next to me, and he's just very casually smiling, saying, well, anytime you're ready, Joe.
So Joe did the rest of the tour with us, and it was phenomenal. But he had commitments and couldn't, he had a record to make and a tour booked and stuff like that. So had we continued, we'd have had to then lost our momentum after the Ritchie thing and waited probably for a year before we could have done anything with Joe. And that was a year too long at that time. And so we had to decide on a permanent replacement, which is where Steve Morse came in. We all chose him because of his work with the Dixie Dregs, and his music is lyrical, very lyrical. He's the complete technician. This is all very well and good, but unless you can fit that talent and skill into a group of people, it's meaningless, as we had discovered before.
Steve Morse had been voted the world's best guitarist 5 years in a row, but the pressure of his first gig with Purple even got to him.
I screwed up one of the arrangements. It was so funny. I went to a solo early or something, or ended a solo early, and the band kind of settled into this vamp, and I was like, hey, that's cool. They're changing the ranges. That's really cool. And then Ian comes over and says, hey, that's really good, Steve. You know, with the microphone to 15,000 people. What do you say we have a little jam in G? Oh yeah. Everybody laughs in the band, and we go to the part that I had left out. I thought for a first gig to go that well, something magic is happening, and it has been. Just the easiest thing in the world. It's get up on stage and have a good time with them. It's just nothing to it.
Started working on Perpendicular, and what a joy that was. It had a lovely, fresh and happy feel about it. A lot of that was, of course, due to Steve Morse, but a lot of it also was down to Ian Gillan and his great willingness to try anything.
Ian Gillan is clearly a man who relishes a challenge, taking on George Best in a game of soccer, for instance, but going toe-to-toe with the maestro Luciano Pavarotti, singing Nessun Dorma.
When Nicoletta came to me to say that the Deep Purple are going to come and sing Nessun Dorma with me, I said, are you well today? Yeah. Are you sure that he's coming to make Nessun Dorma? He says, yes. So, well, let's see.
Nessun Dorma.
Nessun Dorma is the most difficult piece in our range. To picture such a sweet person and such a very beautiful musician in a field out of his field, trying to kill himself, because many people have done before. I say to myself, this guy must be either a genius, either completely crazy. Well, obviously he's a genius.
The secret's locked inside my heart. Nobody here will know my name. No, no, till morning. Quando luce
to stand toe-to-toe with one of the great tenor voices of the last 50 years, singing the song that has defined that singer, his anthem, if you like. And Ian, I thought, made a hell of a fist at it. Brilliant attempt.
Oh, I thought it was exhilarant, absolutely. Courageous in the meantime, and like I say before, they call me challenger in my profession, so to see another person who is doing the same thing with such a name and put himself on the spot. Yes, I enjoy it very much. When I explain to the young generation how is the way to sing, I always say, isn't screaming, educated, but screaming, yelling to somebody who is very far from you, but very educated. And that is the reason why it's very difficult to succeed, to reach the effect, and then long study.
There are few rock singers with the courage to sing Nessun Dorma with Luciano Pavarotti. Ian did it twice, the second time with new keyboard player Don Airey in tow.
It takes a lot of, chutzpah, and Ian did it. And he made it, he gave it his own identity. He didn't try to be an opera singer, he just was himself. And he carried it off amazingly. I can't remember when I was so impressed.
All'alba vincerò.
This human being is very, very particular. And when he goes out, he's, I don't want to say losing this kind of charming. He's keeping this charming and put inside some tiger thing who is typical of the performer.
In 2006, Ian Gillan celebrated 40 years in rock. Rapture of the Deep has sold the most copies since Perfect Strangers.
And the daylight fades, and the stars come out. Never much to talk about. Another day goes rushing by. Here we are just wondering why we have to belong with a sense of purpose. That's all we need. Without them we're worthless.
He was probably the most uncreative person I'd met, and he's turned out to be, a guru to me in terms of creativity. So I have to give him a big nod for that. I think he's become far, far bigger person than I would have ever thought 40 years ago.
Roger's the nearest thing I ever had to a brother, I think, over the years. I say that without any offense to any of my other friends, but we went through a lot together, personally and professionally.
As a front man, he's without par to me. He can walk on and you can't take your eyes off him.
I don't know that anybody in Purple or in any band has ever had more passion about their music than he does. He lives to be the singer of Deep Purple. That's his whole life. And when he goes on stage, everybody in the audience knows that. Except the reviewers. No, just kidding.
parties better now than we did when he was 25, and he sings better now than he did when he was 25. And yeah, he's a rock and roll animal, you know. I don't know other way to put it. He's a rock and roll animal.
He's our hero, of course. All of us need Ian Gillan in our life. When he's singing to you about a story, you really believe it. And there are very few singers who can convey that, who can make you really believe that they've been there and they're singing from experience. Of course, he does that great thing, which is he can scream like no other. Like no other. To me, he's the best at those high screams, which it's hard to put into words what they mean, but we know that we need them. We need a big, strong guy to get up there and scream his ass off.
He's unique, you know, there's only one Ian Gillan. He'll just walk up to the microphone and deliver a line and it's world class, you know. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, that.
Ian's singing better than ever. They're all playing better than ever. And they're happy and they're relaxed. You can see by the smiles on their faces when they're dancing across the stage. I mean, these are lovely old guys who are just having good fun now.
There once was a woman, a strange kind of woman, kind of gets written down in history. Her name was Nancy, her face was nothing fancy. She left a trail of happiness and misery. Why? I loved her, everybody loved her. She loved everyone and gave a good return. I tried to take her, even tried to break her. She said, I ain't for taking what you never learned.
One of the most unique, talented, brightest people that I've ever known. Those are such broad adjectives that don't really grab onto to the man unless he's here and you see the interaction. You know, I guess the best way I could say it is, he's my mate, and that's better than anything.
We're talking here about, you know, this guy who's a superstar. I take people as I find them, and I always have done. I just find him to be a nice guy, and that's all that matters to me. And I regard him as a friend.
How he does it, I don't know. Most singers lose their voice in the 60s, and they have to kind of talk through it. But Ian seems to have found a new voice. You know, he's found something more to say.
Blues sound familiar. Never alone. Always remind me home.
He's going to be singing till he drops, I think. I can't see him stopping. Not now. Not now that he's got the bit between his teeth. You know?
He's a Peter Pan. Doesn't seem to accept the fact that you get older. He looks fantastic and he's singing like a dream. I don't know what he's on, but I'll have 50 quid's worth, I tell you. Some of the stuff that he left behind from the 70s will live on as almost a textbook example of what you can do with the human voice in rock and roll if you just have courage and strength and the desire to enjoy yourself.
He's given huge amounts of pleasure to huge numbers of people, so you can't argue with that. You know, it's an amazing thing.
In many respects, he's kind of uncopyable. You can't really copy what he does. It's very unique, and that's a gift, you know, and that's something that we all strive to have, is you can't copy me because you're not capable of doing it.
He may have been screaming down the rock and roll highway for the last 4 decades, but Ian's certainly not ready to hang up his microphone just yet.
It is 40 years, that's quite a thing, isn't it? It's just... And we're still looking forward. That's the thing. I think that's the exciting thing. It'd be nice to look at the next 2, 3, 4 years as being filled with romance and adventure and music.
In the season, leaves are falling down. Autumn shades of red and brown. I heard you were leaving. Mind if I go along? I could hold your hand.
Anything else that you can think of?
No, I can't think of anything more to talk about that asshole. Sorry.